The distress beacon had been broadcasting for 17 cycles now, and Commander Zelith knew that no one was coming. She stood on the observation deck of the mining station, staring out at the wreckage of what had once been a thriving colony. The Crithian raiders had done their work well, leaving behind only ruins and corpses. The station trembled again as another explosion echoed through the lower levels. The pirates were methodical in their destruction, taking what they wanted and burning the rest. Zeleth's people, the Verath, were scholars and miners, not warriors. They had no weapons capable of fighting back against the heavily armed raiders who now prowled through their home. "Commander, the evacuation pods are all destroyed," reported Lieutenant Morvex, his voice cracking with barely controlled fear. "They've sealed off the main corridors. We're trapped in this sector with maybe 200 survivors." Zelith closed her 4 eyes briefly, allowing herself one moment of despair before opening them again. 200 souls out of the 3,000 who had called this station home just 3 days ago. The Crithians had murdered the rest or taken them as slaves. The galaxy knew about the Crithian raiders, but no one had the courage to stop them. They were too powerful, too ruthless, and too well connected to the corrupt councils that governed this sector of space. "Keep everyone calm," Zelith ordered, her mandibles clicking softly. "Maintain the distress signal. Someone might hear us." But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were hollow. The Galactic Cooperative had abandoned this region years ago, deeming it too dangerous and too resource-poor to defend. The mining station existed on the very edge of civilized space, far from any military installations or trade routes. They had been told that their isolation was temporary, that expansion and protection would eventually reach them. Those promises now seemed like cruel jokes. Another blast shook the station, and Zelith heard screams echoing from somewhere below. The Crithians were getting closer to their hiding spot. She had gathered the survivors in the old survey wing, a forgotten section of the station that most raiders wouldn't bother exploring. But it was only a matter of time before they were discovered. "Commander, look at this," Morvex said suddenly, his voice sharp with surprise. He was hunched over a communications console, his scales rippling with agitation. "The distress beacon just received an acknowledgement signal." Zelith rushed to his side, her hearts pounding with sudden hope. "What? From whom? Where?" Morvex manipulated the controls with trembling claws. "The signature is... I don't recognize it. It's not Verath, not Crithian, not any of the cooperative species. The encryption is unlike anything in our databases." "Could it be more raiders?" Zelith asked, though she already knew the answer would crush her brief spark of hope. "The signal strength suggests something massive, Commander. Whatever sent this acknowledgement is big, really big, and it's moving fast. The computer estimates arrival in less than half a cycle." Zelith felt her breathing quicken. Half a cycle. That could mean rescue, or it could mean an even worse fate than the Crithians. There were stories of things that lurked in the dark spaces between stars, of ancient machines and hostile intelligences that viewed organic life as nothing more than raw materials. "Should we respond?" Morvex asked. Before Zelith could answer, the station shook violently, and the lights flickered. Through the observation window, she saw one of the station's main support structures collapse in a cascade of sparks and debris. The Crithians had planted charges on the structural beams. They were going to bring the entire station down around their ears. "Yes," Zelith decided, "send everything we have. Our species designation, our situation, coordinates of the raider ships. If whoever is coming wants to help, they need to know what they're facing. If they're coming to finish us off, then at least we die trying." Morvex's claws flew across the console, encoding their desperate plea into the standard first contact protocols used by the Galactic Cooperative. He added visual feeds from the station's damaged cameras, showing the extent of the destruction and the positions of the Crithian vessels. 3 massive Crythian destroyers hung in orbit around the station like vultures circling a dying animal. Each ship was twice the size of the largest Vareth civilian vessel ever constructed, bristling with weapons and armored with hull plating that could shrug off all but the most powerful military-grade weapons. The raiders had also deployed dozens of fighter craft that swarmed around the station like angry insects, occasionally firing on any structure that still showed signs of life. "Message sent," Morvex reported. "Now we wait." They didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, every functioning sensor on the station began screaming alerts. Morvex stared at his displays in disbelief, his mouth hanging open. "What is it?" Xyleth demanded. "Something just entered the system," Morvex whispered. "Mass readings are off the scale. It's enormous, Commander, bigger than all 3 Crythian destroyers combined, and it's accelerating at speeds that should be impossible for something that size." Xyleth pulled up the sensor feed on her own display and felt her blood run cold. The contact was indeed massive, and it was heading straight for them at a velocity that defied everything she knew about physics and engineering. Whatever this thing was, it possessed technology far beyond anything the Varath or even the Crythians had access to. "Are the Crythians reacting?" she asked. "They've seen it," Morvex confirmed. "Their ships are breaking orbit and forming a defensive formation. They're hailing the approaching vessel on all frequencies." "Can we intercept their communications?" Morvex worked his console for a moment. "Yes, I'm routing it through now." The harsh, guttural language of the Crythians filled the command center. Xyleth's translator implant struggled with the aggressive dialect, but she caught the essential meaning. The Crythians were demanding identification and ordering the unknown vessel to halt immediately or face destruction. There was no fear in their transmission, only arrogance and barely controlled rage at being interrupted. The response, when it came, was not in any language Xyleth recognized. The words were sharp and clipped, spoken with absolute certainty and cold authority. Her translator implant worked frantically, cross-referencing phonemes and grammatical structures, searching its massive database for anything remotely similar. "Stand down immediately. You are engaged in acts of piracy and mass murder. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded for prosecution under sentient rights protocols. This is your only warning." The voice was human. The realization struck Xyleth like a physical blow. Humans. The legendary species from the far side of the galaxy, the ones who had been making waves in cooperative space for the last few decades. The species that many dismissed as reckless and violent, but others spoke of with a mixture of fear and admiration. The Crythian response was predictable. They opened fire. Xyleth watched on the sensors as hundreds of weapons fired simultaneously from the 3 destroyers, unleashing enough destructive energy to vaporize a small moon. Missiles streaked through space, their warheads packed with antimatter. Energy beams hot enough to boil oceans slashed through the vacuum toward the approaching human vessel. The human ship didn't even slow down. Its defensive systems engaged with casual efficiency, deploying clouds of countermeasures that detonated the missiles at safe distances. Energy shields flared to life, absorbing the beam weapons as if they were nothing more than flashlights. And through it all, the ship kept coming. "What kind of shields are those?" Morvex breathed in awe. "The energy absorption rates are impossible." The human vessel finally came into visual range, and Xyleth felt her legs weaken at the sight of it. The ship was a monument to war, every line and surface dedicated to violence and destruction. It was roughly rectangular, covered in armor plating that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Gun emplacements studded its hull like the spines of some deep-sea predator, each barrel larger than an entire Varath shuttle. Along its flanks, she could see launch bays for fighter craft and what appeared to be massive railgun installations. But it was the front of the ship that truly terrified her. The bow was armored with overlapping plates of some unknown alloy, designed to ram through obstacles. and painted across that armored prow in letters 10 meters tall was a name, UNSC Retribution. They named their warship Retribution, Zealeth said quietly. They came here for revenge. The human battleship closed to engagement range and its weapons came to life. The first salvo was a lesson in restraint and precision. Railgun rounds the size of ground vehicles screamed through space at relativistic speeds, slamming into the shields of the lead Crithian destroyer. The shields held for perhaps 2 seconds before collapsing entirely, and the following rounds punched through the destroyer's armor like it was paper. The Crithian ship tried to return fire, but the human vessel was already moving, its massive bulk dancing through space with impossible grace. It rolled hard to starboard, presenting its heavily armored flank to the enemy fire while its own guns never stopped firing. The second destroyer took a broadside that tore it nearly in half. Atmosphere and bodies venting into space as secondary explosions rippled through its hull. The third Crithian destroyer tried to run. Its captain must have realized in those few seconds of combat that they were facing something completely beyond their capabilities. The destroyer's engines flared bright as it attempted to break away and enter faster than light speeds. The human battleship didn't allow it. A single weapon on the ship's ventral surface tracked the fleeing destroyer, a massive cannon that crackled with blue-white energy. When it fired, the beam that emerged was so bright that the station's cameras automatically dimmed to avoid damage. The beam crossed the distance between ships in an instant, striking the destroyer's engines. The Crithian ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, desperately fleeing for its life, and the next, it was expanding plasma and debris. The battle, if it could even be called that, had lasted less than 3 minutes. 3 of the most feared warships in this sector of space, destroyed with almost casual efficiency by a single human vessel. Zealeth stared at the display, unable to process what she had just witnessed. "Commander," Morvex said, his voice shaking, "we're being hailed. It's them, the humans." Zealeth straightened her uniform and took a deep breath. "Put them through." The face that appeared on the screen was unlike any she had encountered before. Humans were bilateral and bipedal like many species, but there was something in their expressions, in their eyes, that spoke of depths of emotion and determination that seemed almost alien in their intensity. The human on the screen was female, her skin dark and smooth, her hair cropped short. She wore a military uniform of dark blue with insignia that Zealeth didn't recognize. "I am Captain Maria Okonkwo of the United Nations Space Command vessel Retribution," the human said, her translator rendering her words into perfect Verath. "We received your distress call. Are there survivors?" Zealeth found her voice. "Yes, Captain. I am Commander Zealeth of the Verath Mining Collective. We have approximately 200 survivors trapped in the survey wing. The station is heavily damaged and structurally unsound." Captain Okonkwo nodded sharply. "Understood. We're deploying rescue teams now. Hold tight, Commander. We're coming to get you." "Captain," Zealeth said quickly, before the human could end the transmission. "Thank you. We thought no one would come. We thought we were abandoned." Something flickered across the human's face, an emotion so raw and powerful that Zealeth felt it across the distance and species barrier. When Captain Okonkwo spoke again, her voice was soft but filled with iron certainty. "Humanity doesn't abandon people in need, Commander. Not ever. That's a promise we made to ourselves a long time ago, and it's a promise we extend to every thinking being in this galaxy. You called for help, and we answered. That's what we do." The transmission ended, and Zealeth slumped against the console, relief flooding through her body in waves. Around her, the other survivors who had heard the exchange began to weep, the tension and fear of the last 3 days finally breaking. They were saved. Against all odds, against all reason, they were going to survive. Through the observation window, Xylith could see the human battleship moving into position near the station. Smaller craft began launching from its bays, sleek shuttles marked with red crosses and carrying rescue equipment. The humans had come thundering out of the darkness like an ancient legend made real, and they had brought salvation with them. Xylith didn't know what this meant for the future, didn't know what price the humans might demand for their rescue. But in that moment, watching the rescue shuttles approach, she didn't care. They were alive, and that was enough. The first human to enter the survey wing was a massive male wearing powered armor that made him look like a walking tank. The armor was painted in urban camouflage patterns, and the helmet's faceplate was transparent, revealing a scarred face with kind eyes. He carried a weapon that looked more like a small cannon than a rifle, but he held it pointed safely at the ground as he entered. "United Nations Marine Corps," he announced in accented but understandable Varath. "We're here to evacuate you. Is anyone seriously injured?" For a moment, no one moved. The survivors simply stared at this armored giant who had appeared in their darkest hour. Then a young Varath female stumbled forward, clutching a bleeding wound on her thorax. "Please," she gasped. "My clutch sister. The Crithians shot her. She's in the back room. She's dying." The Marine didn't hesitate. He moved with surprising speed for someone in such heavy armor, following the young female deeper into the survey wing. More humans poured in behind him, some in armor, others wearing what appeared to be medical gear. They carried stretchers, medical scanners, and equipment that Xylith couldn't identify. A human female approached Xylith, her movements quick and efficient. She wore a white uniform with red crosses on the shoulders, and her hands moved constantly as she pulled out a scanning device. "Commander Xylith, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, UNSC Medical Corps. Are you injured?" "Minor cuts and bruises," Xylith replied, still somewhat dazed by the sudden invasion of helpful humans. "Nothing serious, but many of my people are hurt. The Crithians were not gentle." Dr. Chen's face hardened at the mention of the raiders. "We'll take care of everyone. My team is the best in the fleet. Can you give me a quick head count of survivors and their approximate conditions?" Xylith pulled up her datapad, hands shaking slightly as she transferred the information. 217 survivors. 32 are critically wounded, 67 have serious injuries, and the rest have minor wounds or psychological trauma. The doctor absorbed this information with a grim nod. "All right, we're setting up a triage area in your main cargo bay. The station's too unstable to treat people here. We need to evacuate everyone to the Retribution within the next 2 hours. Can you help organize your people?" "Of course," Xylith said, grateful to have something concrete to focus on. "What do you need me to do?" For the next hour, Xylith worked alongside the human rescue teams, helping to coordinate the evacuation. She was continuously amazed by the efficiency and compassion displayed by these strange beings. The humans moved through the damaged station like they had done this 1,000 times before, treating injuries with quick competence and speaking softly to traumatized survivors. The Marine she had first seen emerged from the back room carrying the wounded Varath female in his arms as if she weighed nothing. He moved carefully, his armored boots finding purchase on the damaged flooring with practiced ease. "Got her stabilized," he reported to Dr. Chen. "Gunshot wound to the primary lung, but she's a fighter. She'll make it." The young Varath who had led him to her sister clutched at his armored forearm. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you so much." The Marine's scarred face softened. "No thanks needed, kid. This is what we do. Now come on. Let's get you both somewhere safe." Xylith followed the evacuation teams back through the station, marveling at the destruction she hadn't fully registered during the siege. Entire sections were simply gone, blown open to vacuum. Bodies of her people lay in corridors, and she had to look away from their frozen faces. The humans didn't look away. They stopped at each body, scanning them for identification and carefully documenting their positions for later recovery. "We'll come back for them," one of the Marines told her quietly, noticing her distress. "We don't leave anyone behind, not the living and not the dead. They'll be recovered and returned to your people for proper mourning rites." The human shuttle was larger than Zilith had expected, its interior configured as a mobile hospital. Wounded Verath lay on specialized medical beds, while human doctors and nurses moved between them, administering treatments and monitoring vital signs. The technology on display was staggering. Zilith watched as one doctor used a small device that seemed to knit flesh and bone back together in real time, healing a wound that would have required extensive surgery by Verath standards. "How is this possible?" she asked Dr. Chen, who was directing the medical operations with calm authority. "Regenerative medicine," Chen explained, not looking up from her patient. "We've made significant advances in the last 50 years. This technology isn't standard in cooperative space yet?" "No," Zilith said quietly. "Nothing like this. The cooperative's medical technology is adequate, but this is beyond anything I've seen." Chen glanced at her briefly, and Zilith saw something complex flash across the human's face. "Well, you're seeing it now, and you're welcome to it. We didn't come all this way to let anyone die if we can prevent it." The shuttle lifted off smoothly, and through the viewport, Zilith caught her last glimpse of the mining station that had been her home for 6 years. It was a broken shell, torn apart by greed and violence. She felt a wave of grief and anger wash over her, and her mandibles clicked together in distress. "Easy," Dr. Chen said, placing a gentle hand on Zilith's shoulder. "You survived. That's what matters. The station can be rebuilt, but lives can't be replaced." The approach to the UNSC retribution was breathtaking. The battleship hung in space like a sleeping predator, its dark hull absorbing the light from the distant star. As the shuttle drew closer, Zilith could make out the details she had missed before. The ship was covered in scars, dents, and scorches from previous battles. This was a vessel that had seen combat, survived, and come back for more. The shuttle bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold dozens of vessels the size of their rescue craft. Human personnel in various uniforms moved with purposeful efficiency, directing the incoming shuttles and organizing the arriving refugees. Zilith felt overwhelmed by the scale of everything, by the sheer power and resources that humanity had at its disposal. Captain Okonkwo was waiting when Zilith descended the shuttle ramp. The human captain looked tired, Zilith noticed, with dark circles under her eyes and tension in her shoulders. But her back was straight, and her gaze was clear and focused. "Commander Zilith," Okonkwo said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome aboard the Retribution. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." Zilith carefully clasped the human's hand, mimicking the gesture. "Captain, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my people. You came when no one else would." Okonkwo's expression darkened. "We picked up your distress signal 2 days ago, but we were 3 systems away dealing with another situation. We came as fast as we could. I'm sorry we didn't arrive sooner." "2 days?" Zilith repeated, stunned. "But that's impossible. The distance you would have to travel, the speeds required." "Humanity's faster-than-light drives are more efficient than cooperative standard," Okonkwo said simply. "When we heard your call for help, when we saw what was happening to your people, we pushed our engines to their limits. My chief engineer is probably going to need a week to repair the stress damage." Zilith felt her eyes welling with moisture. These humans had damaged their own ship rushing to save strangers. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do that for us? We're not part of your species, not your allies. We're just miners on the edge of nowhere." Captain Okonkwo's face softened, and she gestured for Zilith to walk with her through the bustling hangar bay. Commander, humanity learned some hard lessons in our history. Lessons written in blood and suffering. We learned what happens when people ignore cries for help, when they turn away from injustice because it's not their problem. We learned the cost of apathy and the price of cowardice. They entered a corridor that seemed to stretch forever into the ship's interior. The walls were lined with photographs and plaques, memorials to battles and fallen crew members. Okonkwo continued speaking, her voice taking on a weight that Zileth could feel. When we finally made it to the stars, when we met other species and saw the state of this galaxy, we made a choice. We decided that the lessons we learned the hard way shouldn't be wasted. We decided that if we had the power to help, we had the responsibility to act. Not for profit, not for political advantage, but because it's the right thing to do. Zilith looked at the memorials as they passed, reading names in human languages she didn't understand. But she understood the sentiment behind them. These were people who had died fighting for something they believed in, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The Galactic Cooperative doesn't think that way, Zileth said bitterly. They abandoned this region because it wasn't profitable enough to defend. They left us to the mercy of pirates and raiders. I know, Okonkwo said, and there was anger in her voice now. We've seen it throughout cooperative space. Worlds left undefended, colonies abandoned, people suffering while the councils debate and delay. It's one of the reasons humanity has been so reluctant to fully integrate into the cooperative system. We have different values, different priorities. They arrived at what appeared to be a conference room. Inside, several other humans waited, along with a few Varath survivors that Zilith recognized as community leaders from the mining station. Okonkwo gestured for Zilith to take a seat at the large table. Commander, I wanted you and your people's leaders here because we need to have an honest conversation about what happens next, Okonkwo said once everyone was settled. Your station is destroyed beyond practical repair. The Krithian raiders are neutralized, but their organization will eventually notice their ships are missing. You and your people are refugees now, and you need to make some decisions about your future. One of the other Varath, an elderly male named Torvash, spoke up. What are our options, Captain? Okonkwo pulled up a holographic display that showed a star map of the surrounding region. We can transport you to the nearest Varath colony world, which is about 3 weeks away at standard cooperative FTL speeds. Or, if you're willing, we can take you to one of the human frontier stations. They're closer, better defended, and we have established refugee integration programs. You would take in refugees from another species? Zileth asked, surprised. A human male sitting next to Okonkwo smiled. He wore a civilian outfit with a badge that identified him as Diplomatic Corps. Ma'am, Earth alone has integrated over 40 different refugee populations from across cooperative space in the last decade. We have entire cities built specifically to accommodate different species' environmental needs. It's not charity. Refugees bring skills, knowledge, and perspectives that enrich our society. We benefit just as much as they do. Torvash looked skeptical. And what would you expect from us in return? The diplomat's smile faded, replaced by a more serious expression. Honestly, nothing you're not willing to give. We'd help you get established, find work that suits your skills and interests, and integrate into human society if you choose. Some refugees prefer to maintain separate communities, and that's fine too. The only requirement is that you follow our laws and respect the rights of others. Beyond that, you're free to build whatever life you want. Zileth looked at her fellow survivors, seeing the uncertainty and hope warring on their faces. They had lost everything, but these humans were offering them something precious, a chance to rebuild, to start over in a place where they would be protected. Could we see our people first? Zileth asked. The wounded, I mean. Before we make any decisions, we need to know everyone is all right. Of course, Okonkwo said immediately. Dr. Chen's teams have set up a medical bay specifically for your people. I'll have someone escort you there now. The medical bay was unlike anything Zealeth had ever seen. The facility was enormous, with sections clearly designed to accommodate multiple species' physiologies. The wounded Verath were spread across dozens of beds, and human medical staff moved between them with practiced efficiency. The air hummed with the sound of diagnostic equipment and regenerative medical devices. Zealeth moved through the rows of beds, checking on her people. Many were already showing remarkable improvement, their wounds healing at speeds that should have been impossible. The young Verath, whose sister had been shot, was sitting beside her sibling's bed, holding her hand, while the injured female slept peacefully. "She's going to be fine," Dr. Chen said, appearing at Zealeth's elbow. "Another day of regenerative treatment, and she'll be back on her feet. All of your critically wounded are stable now. We didn't lose a single patient." Zealeth felt tears streaming down her face, her emotional control finally breaking. "You saved them all. You saved all of us." Chen's expression was gentle but firm. "That's what we do, Commander. That's what humanity stands for. We believe that every life has value, that every person deserves a chance to survive and thrive. It's not complicated philosophy. It's just basic decency." As Zealeth wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself, she heard raised voices from near the entrance to the medical bay. A group of human officers had entered, and they were speaking urgently with Captain Okonkwo. The captain's face had gone hard and cold, her jaw clenched with barely controlled anger. Okonkwo caught Zealeth watching and approached her. "Commander, I need to inform you of something. My tactical team has been analyzing the wreckage of the Crithian vessels and reviewing the data you sent us about the attack. They've discovered something troubling." "What is it?" Zealeth asked, feeling her heart sink. "The Crithian raiders had cooperative military-grade weapons," Okonkwo said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Not just standard pirate equipment, but cutting-edge military hardware that should only be available to official cooperative defense forces. The missiles they fired at us had serial numbers that trace back to a weapons depot in the Zelthon system." Zealeth felt cold spread through her body. "The Zelthon system is a major cooperative military hub. Are you saying the cooperative military is supplying weapons to pirates?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Okonkwo replied. "And it gets worse. We pulled the communication logs from the Crithian flagship before it was destroyed. They had been in regular contact with someone calling themselves Counselor Vresh. The messages suggest a long-standing arrangement where the raiders are given coordinates of poorly defended targets in exchange for a percentage of the plunder. The implications made Zealeth's head spin. They were told where to find us. The cooperative gave us to the raiders." "It appears so," Okonkwo confirmed. "This region was officially abandoned by the cooperative, but based on these communications, it seems more like you were deliberately left vulnerable. Easy pickings for the raiders who then share their profits with corrupt officials." Torvash, who had followed Zealeth to the medical bay, made a sound of rage deep in his throat. "They sacrificed us. 3,000 people murdered or enslaved, and it was all part of some corrupt arrangement." One of the human officers, a woman with commander's insignia, stepped forward. "Captain, we have confirmation from intelligence. The Counselor Vresh mentioned in the communications is Vresh Kelton, a high-ranking member of the Galactic Cooperative Defense Committee. He's been under investigation by several human intelligence agencies for corruption, but we've never had solid proof before." Okonkwo's expression could have frozen stars. "We have proof now. Commander Hayes, prepare a full intelligence package. Every scrap of data we pulled from those Crithian ships, every communication log, every financial record we can find. I want it bulletproof and ready to present to the Cooperative Council." "What will happen?" Zealeth asked quietly. "Will they even care? Will there be justice for my people?" The captain turned to her, and Zealeth saw something burning in the human's eyes that was both terrifying and comforting. "Commander, I can't promise you the Cooperative Council will do the right thing. They're political creatures, more concerned with maintaining their power than protecting their citizens. But I can promise you that humanity won't let this slide. We don't tolerate this kind of evil, and we sure as hell don't turn a blind eye to mass murder. Over the next 2 days, Zileth watched as the humans worked with frightening efficiency. The Retribution became a hive of activity as crews cataloged evidence, rescued the remaining survivors from the station, and began the process of recovering the dead. True to their word, the humans treated every Verath body with respect, carefully documenting and preserving them for return to their families. During this time, Zileth had the opportunity to interact more with the human crew, and each conversation deepened her respect and wonder for these strange beings. She met engineers who spoke passionately about their ship as if it were a living thing. She encountered Marines who spent their off-duty hours teaching Verath children games and distracting them from their trauma. She observed the quiet professionalism of the medical staff who worked around the clock to ensure every survivor received the best possible care. One evening, as Zileth sat in the observation deck watching the stars, Captain Okonkwo joined her. The human carried 2 containers of what she explained was called coffee, a stimulant beverage popular among her species. "How are your people holding up?" Okonkwo asked, settling into a seat beside Zileth. "Better than I would have thought possible," Zileth admitted. "Your crew has been incredible. I've never experienced such genuine kindness from strangers before." Okonkwo smiled slightly. "We're not that special, Commander. We're just doing what anyone with a conscience should do." "But that's the point," Zileth said intensely. "Most people don't. Most species in the cooperative look out for their own interests first. They'll help if it's convenient or profitable, but they won't go out of their way. They certainly won't damage their own ship rushing across space to save aliens they've never met." The captain was quiet for a moment, sipping her coffee. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Commander, can I tell you a story about why humanity is the way we are?" Zileth gestured her agreement, and Okonkwo continued. "A few hundred years ago, back on Earth, humanity went through what we call the Fracture Wars. It was a period of intense conflict driven by greed, nationalism, and resource scarcity. Billions died. Entire regions were rendered uninhabitable. We came so close to destroying ourselves that for a while it looked like humanity wouldn't survive the century." Okonkwo's gaze was distant, as if seeing the history she described. "But we didn't destroy ourselves. At our darkest moment, something shifted. People started focusing on what united us rather than what divided us. We built new systems of government, new ways of distributing resources, new philosophies about our responsibilities to each other. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. But slowly, we rebuilt our world. When we finally reached the stars and met other species, we carried those lessons with us," the captain continued. "We saw the same patterns we had escaped from playing out across the galaxy: greed, corruption, powerful entities preying on the weak. And we made a choice. We decided that we would stand for something different, that we would be the people who show up when others need help, that we would fight against injustice even when it's not convenient or profitable." Zileth absorbed this, understanding dawning. "You're not doing this for us. You're doing it for yourselves, to be the people you want to be." "Maybe," Okonkwo acknowledged. "But does the motivation matter if the result is the same? Your people are safe, the raiders are stopped, and we're going to make sure the corrupt officials who enabled this are held accountable." Speaking of accountability, it arrived sooner than Zileth expected. 3 days after the rescue, a Galactic Cooperative diplomatic vessel entered the system. It was a sleek ship, designed more for appearance than function, bearing the official seals of the Cooperative Council. Captain Okonkwo received the delegation in one of the Retribution's conference rooms. Zileth was invited to attend, along with several other Verath survivors and key members of the human crew. The cooperative delegation consisted of 3 officials from different member species, all wearing elaborate robes that denoted their high rank. The lead official, a tall Xantharian with pale blue skin, spoke first. His tone was condescending, the voice of someone used to being obeyed without question. "I am Minister Kelthros of the Galactic Cooperative Council. We received disturbing reports about human military vessels engaging in unauthorized combat operations in cooperative space. This is a serious violation of the treaties between our governments." Okonkwo's expression didn't change. "Minister, we responded to a distress call from a civilian station under attack by pirates. We followed standard rescue protocols and engaged hostile forces that threatened civilian lives. These are actions permitted under the Cooperative Emergency Response Charter, Article 7. Minister Kelthros waved a dismissive hand. The region in question had been designated as outside cooperative protection zones. Your intervention was not requested by any legitimate cooperative authority. The people being murdered on that station requested our intervention, Okonkwo said, her voice dropping to a dangerous level. Or does the Cooperative Council believe that some civilians don't deserve protection? One of the other officials, a squat Dwarven female, interjected. "Captain, you must understand the complexity of the situation. The cooperative cannot maintain military presence in every fringe system. Resources are limited, and priorities must be set." "Priorities," Okonkwo repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. She pulled up a holographic display that showed the data recovered from the Crithian ships. "Let's talk about priorities, Counselor. These are communication logs between the pirates who attacked the mining station and Counselor Vresh Kelthan. They detail a long-standing arrangement where cooperative officials provide targeting information to raiders in exchange for a share of the profits." The room went deathly silent. Minister Kelthros's skin shifted to a darker shade of blue, a sign of distress in his species. "Those allegations are outrageous. Where did you obtain this information?" "From the wreckage of the pirate vessels," Commander Hayes said, stepping forward. "We have complete data records, financial transactions, and encoded communications. We also have weapons serial numbers that trace directly to cooperative military depots. The evidence is comprehensive and undeniable." The Dwarven counselor tried to bluster. "Even if this data is accurate, and I'm not conceding that it is, you had no authority to seize it. Any evidence obtained through unauthorized military action is inadmissible." Zilith found herself rising to her feet, her voice shaking with rage. "Inadmissible? You dare speak of legal technicalities while 3,000 of my people lie dead? While children were orphaned and families were torn apart by pirates your own officials were protecting?" The counselors turned to look at her, and Zilith saw calculation in their eyes. They were already trying to figure out how to spin this, how to minimize the damage to their reputations and power. "Commander Zilith, we understand you're upset," Minister Kelthros began, in what he probably thought was a soothing tone. "But you must understand that this is a complex political situation. Making wild accusations based on questionable evidence will only complicate matters." "Wild accusations?" Zilith spat. "I watched my people die. I held children as they cried for parents who would never come back. And you want to talk about complications?" Captain Okonkwo placed a gentle hand on Zilith's shoulder, a gesture of support. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Minister, counselors, let me make something very clear. The evidence we've gathered is being transmitted to every major news organization in cooperative space as we speak. We're also sharing it with human intelligence agencies, independent anti-corruption watchdogs, and several member species governments who we believe will be interested in investigating this matter thoroughly." The color drained from Minister Kelthros's face. "You can't do that. There are proper channels for these kinds of allegations." "The proper channels failed," Okonkwo said flatly. "The proper channels left these people to die. Humanity doesn't have much faith in your proper channels anymore, Minister. We prefer to rely on transparency and public accountability. One of the human officers pulled up another holographic display. We've also compiled evidence of similar arrangements in 17 other systems along the cooperative frontier. It appears this wasn't an isolated incident, but a systematic operation. You're looking at one of the largest corruption scandals in cooperative history. The counselors looked at each other, and Zealith could see the panic in their body language. This wasn't just about one corrupt official anymore. This was an existential threat to the cooperative's credibility and power. "What do you want?" the Dwarven counselor asked finally, her tone defeated. "Justice," Okonkwo said simply. "Real justice, not a cover-up or a token investigation that goes nowhere. We want Counselor Vresh Kelthan and everyone involved in this operation arrested and prosecuted to the full extent of cooperative law. We want reforms to prevent this from happening again. And we want reparations for the survivors and the families of those who died." "That could take years," Minister Kelthros protested weakly. "Then you'd better get started," Okonkwo replied. "Because if we don't see real action within the next standard month, humanity is prepared to present this evidence to the Galactic Assembly and call for a full investigation into cooperative governance. We'll also be reassessing our relationship with the cooperative and considering whether we want to continue our membership in an organization that enables mass murder for profit." The threat was clear. Humanity was one of the most powerful species in cooperative space, both militarily and economically. If they withdrew or pushed for major reforms, the entire power structure of the cooperative could collapse. The cooperative delegation left shortly after, their expensive robes somehow looking less impressive than when they had arrived. Zealith watched them go, feeling a grim satisfaction. It wasn't enough, could never be enough to bring back the dead, but it was something. "Do you think they'll actually do anything?" she asked Okonkwo. "They'll have to," the captain replied. "We've made this too public to ignore. They'll fight it, they'll drag their feet, but the evidence is too damning. Vresh Kelthan and his co-conspirators are finished." Over the following weeks, Zealith and her people remained aboard the Retribution while decisions were made about their future. The scandal broke across cooperative space exactly as Okonkwo had promised, dominating news feeds and sparking outrage from dozens of member species. Counselor Vresh Kelthan was arrested attempting to flee cooperative space, and investigations were launched into the finances of hundreds of high-ranking officials. Most of the Verath survivors chose to accept the human offer of resettlement. They had seen what humanity was capable of, both in terms of military power and moral courage, and they wanted to be part of that society. A few chose to return to Verath space, and the humans arranged safe transport for them with no judgment or pressure. On the day before they were to arrive at the human frontier station that would become their new home, Zealith stood once again on the observation deck. Captain Okonkwo found her there, just as she had before. "Nervous about tomorrow?" the captain asked. "Excited, actually," Zealith admitted. "We lost everything, but somehow we've gained a chance at something better, a chance to be part of something that actually stands for something." Okonkwo smiled. "You're going to do well. Your people are strong, resourceful, and they've proven they can survive anything. Those are exactly the kind of people humanity values as neighbors and friends." Zealith looked out at the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 weeks ago, she had been certain she and her people were going to die. Abandoned and forgotten on the edge of space. Then a human battleship had thundered out of the darkness, bringing salvation and justice in equal measure. "Captain, I've been meaning to ask," Zealith said. "Why is your ship called Retribution?" Okonkwo was quiet for a moment, her expression distant. "Because sometimes the universe needs retribution. Not revenge, but justice. The kind that comes when good people finally have enough of standing by while evil people do terrible things. We named this ship as a promise, both to ourselves and to anyone who might need us. A promise that when the darkness comes, when people cry out for help, there will be thunder in reply. Zilith felt her eyes moisten again, but this time the tears were different. They weren't tears of grief or despair, but of gratitude and hope. "You kept that promise," she said softly. "We always do," Okonkwo replied. "That's what it means to be human. We show up, we stand up, we fight back against the darkness, and we never, ever abandon people who need help." As the Retribution sailed through the stars toward their new home, Zilith reflected on everything she had learned about humanity. They were a species forged in conflict, shaped by tragedy, and defined by their choice to turn suffering into strength and despair into determination. They weren't perfect, but they tried to be better every single day. The galaxy would never be the same after humanity's arrival. The old powers, the corrupt systems, the casual cruelty that had been accepted for so long were all being challenged. And at the forefront of that challenge was humanity, armed with advanced technology, moral courage, and an absolute refusal to accept injustice. Zilith thought about the future her people would build alongside the humans. It would be different from what they had known, but different didn't mean worse. In fact, standing here on this ship full of beings who valued life and fought for justice, Zilith thought it might be better. Much better. The mining station was gone, reduced to debris and memories. 3,000 of her people were dead, their lives stolen by greed and corruption. But 217 had survived, saved by beings who had crossed the stars to help strangers in need. And those survivors would carry forward the memory of what happened, ensuring that the dead would not be forgotten and that the lessons learned would shape the future. As Zilith watched the stars stream past, she made a silent promise to the memory of those who had died. She would build something worthy of their sacrifice. She would help create a future where people like them would never be abandoned again. And she would teach her people's children about the day when thunder echoed through the darkness and humanity arrived to prove that hope was never truly lost. The UNSC Retribution sailed on through the cosmos, its dark hull scarred but unbowed, its crew ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Behind it lay justice delivered and lives saved. Ahead lay new horizons, new people to help, and new wrongs to right. Because that was what humanity did. They answered the call. They thundered from the darkness when aid was needed. And they never stopped fighting for a galaxy where every life mattered and every person deserved protection. That was the promise of the Retribution, and it was a promise humanity would keep now and always.